We'll examine how President Obama has handled some key issues such as immigration, civil liberties, and the economy. And to help us review and grade his first term in office is Emmy Award-winning journalist Frank Sesno. He's also covered many U.S. presidents. He is now the director of media and public affairs at the George Washington University. And it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here.
Let's start with immigration. As you'll recall, Barack Obama, as a candidate, said he was going to fix it in his first year. And of course, that didn't happen. In fact, in many respects, more undocumented workers have been sent back under his administration than under the Bush administration. So what happened there?
Well, what happened is you can't fix immigration any more than you can win a war on drugs. Not when you have a country like the United States sitting just north of a country in a region like Mexico and Central and South America. It's just not going to happen. Now, you cited what he's done with, sending illegal immigrants back home, and that's happened, and that's been high profile. But the fact, too, is that partly because of the tougher policies along the border, partly because of the economy, the number of illegal immigrants coming to the United States to begin with has gone way down. So that, I think, he would record as a victory.
Now, a lot of Hispanics coalesced around him as a candidate, voted for him because of this issue. Is this something that's going to hurt him this time around? Because even he was recently in front of Univision where they trotted this out and said, hey, you could have gotten this done in your first year, you didn't.
No, I don't think so, because I think that the way it's been portrayed and the way the public reads it in the United States is that it's the Congress that stood in the way of serious immigration reform, and he's not the first president who's experienced that. George W. Bush, his predecessor, a Republican, tried to get meaningful immigration reform passed, the DREAM Act, and it died because the Congress, including the Republicans in Congress, were especially opposed to passing it. So he benefits from being the president who proposes and is pursuing meaningful immigration reform. Of course, he did the executive order where he allowed U.S.-born children of illegal immigrants in many cases to stay here, especially to pursue their schooling. And Democrats have been advantaged over Republicans with respect to the Latino population in this country for a very long time. So even though he's lost some ground to Mitt Romney, he nonetheless still comes out on top in this population.
You mentioned the DREAM Act, but a lot of people say that was just a political stunt. You don't buy that?
No, I think that there was a strong effort by the part of the preceding administration to try to solve this, and this administration too. It's run into the buzzsaw of congressional politics. It also ran into the reality that Barack Obama lost a lot of his own political capital in some of the other fights that he had. So he had a limited ability to jam things through. The fact remains, though, that we do not have in the United States of America meaningful, lasting immigration reform that would address the millions of people who are here illegally but who want to stay and who would probably be able to stay under certain circumstances if you could put the right legislation
It's
together.
not something easy to fix, obviously, but on a grading scale of 1 to 10, where does he come in?
On a 1 to 10, I'd probably give him a 6 on this one. Said the right things, pushed in the right directions, delivered a few things along the margins, but by no means up there at the level where either he or anybody else could consider his efforts to have achieved breakthrough status.
Let's talk about civil liberties. One of the other things he said is, I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay. That hasn't happened as well. There's 150 detainees there. This has been kind of a lightning rod for protests around the world. What happened there?
What happened there is that it's complicated stuff. And when, we say in this country that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. And it was poetry to say as a candidate, I will close Guantanamo. It was part of his hope and change agenda. It was a big bite. It was too big a bite. As it turns out, and as he found out from his own attorney general and legal advisors, bringing those prisoners from Guantanamo to New York or wherever you would have brought them to stand trial was fraught with legal and security issues. The things that he stood for, which the public endorses, shut Guantanamo and everything it stands for, ran headlong into the brick wall of reality.
If you get to second term, is it easier to try and get something like that through? Is it,
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. I think the problem with Guantanamo is matching the ideal of what the United States should stand for, which is not to have some kind of extra legal thing, that's living at the other end of another country, with what actually happens to these people if they come and go through the American justice system.
There's been in the United States, there's been the Liberal Party and the more conservative party, and yet when it comes to some of these issues, it seems like the Democrats have shifted kind of really into the Republican column. Another example would be extending the Patriot Act, which gives domestic agencies unprecedented ability to spy on people here in this country. A lot of people, civil rights advocates, have said that that's given opportunities for them to really profile Muslims here in this country. What happened there?
Again, I think that the experience of 9/11 was so searing for the United States of America that it and all of its citizens have looked hard at what it's going to take to maintain homeland security and some degree of reasonable national security, and figure out how that goes together with the Bill of Rights. You say the Patriot Act has given the government the ability to spy on people. That's an overstatement. I mean, yes, literally, technically, legally, the government has unprecedented power, and it can profile people. And now every time I go through the airport, I hate it because I feel like I'm a suspect, not a citizen in many cases. But we also have a lot of checks and balances in place, and we hope that these things go through, and we trust, because we don't often see it, go through the courts and other things, so that some of these attempts to listen in, wiretap, are approved with the right amount of checks and balances.
You talk about checks and balances. You also talk about courts. One of the bastions in the United States is you're innocent until proven guilty. And yes, in this case, there have been American citizens who've been targeted, killed by drone strikes in Yemen. What about that particular issue?
These are the disconnects. These are the substantial disconnects and contradictions in policy right now. We have a rule of law, but we have something called Guantanamo, where the rule of law doesn't apply. We don't target American citizens, but we target American citizens if they happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We play by the rules of war, but we don't even acknowledge that the drones are doing some of the things that they are doing, and they are doing them by remote control from Florida, among other places. And so you've touched, I think, a live wire of some of the most difficult elements of American foreign policy and legal policy under our rule of law that we are confronting right now. And the public has not really been treated to a fulsome discussion and debate about what this really means through this campaign.
Yeah, will it happen in a second term if Obama's reelected, or does it stay the same?
Well, it will probably stay largely the same. The Department of Homeland Security is up and running, and I don't hear very many challenges to its core. The Patriot Act is up and running, and I hear some at the ends and at the edges, and there will be legal challenges, as there have been. Elements of it will be thrown out by judges, and ultimately some of them make them to the Supreme Court. But as a blanket, sort of blanket statement, the Patriot Act is not going to be thrown out.
Okay, let's talk about civil liberties. And in total, we've kind of touched on some of the key elements. Grading scale, 1 to 10, where does Obama fall here?
It depends what you're grading. It really does. If you're grading civil liberties up against the reality of American foreign policy, politics, and keeping the country safe and secure, he split the difference, you'd give him about a 7. If you're talking about civil liberties in the sense that he himself set up for him in his first campaign, and what he stood for, and what he's delivered on, and what he's lived with, you'd probably give him a 5 or a 4.
He inherited a pretty weak economy. It was in bad shape, but he's gotten a lot of slings and arrows thrown at him in that regard as well, that he hasn't done enough.
Right.
What about the economy?
I think that Barack Obama's core problem in the campaign and in front of the American people is very simple. He's never going to get credit for what didn't happen. It's hard to get credit for what didn't happen. He has made a strong case, and I have read a lot of economists from both sides who make a strong case that without the stimulus package and without the extraordinary measures that the government went to, starting actually under George W. Bush, handed off to and then expanded upon by Barack Obama, that we might have seen 10, 12, 15% unemployment. That's one thing. The second thing is, this is not a business cycle recession, and hasn't been rather. It's been a credit-induced recession. If the bottom fell out of China or India, God forbid, or any place else, and the markets just imploded, it would take a much longer time than if you merely have a business cycle slowdown. So I give him much higher grades on the economy than on these other things.
You mentioned he's not getting credit for what didn't happen, and yet it seems to me when George W. Bush was president, he did sort of get credit for what didn't happen because he was quick to boast that, hey, there hasn't been another terrorist attack. And so why? Why is that?
Well, I actually would not agree with you. I mean, he boasted about that, but I don't think that he got credit to the point that reelected him. He ran and was reelected and had support for a long time on a broad platform of fighting terrorism. So that was just a part of it. But that works. And Obama can make his case. I don't think it's compelling, but he also can point to what did happen. He can and has been running on "I saved General Motors," and you know, the problem is that this is so complicated, and America can be a very insular place. And so, as we know, for example, the whole China card is played over and over again as a job loser when it's not. It's a job creator. The trade and the you know, Buicks are hot in Beijing. Right? They're hotter in Beijing than they are in Baltimore. So he can point to some serious achievements on the economic front, as well as, you know, I did what I did and it would have been worse otherwise.
But there are so many people who say that so much of the stimulus was wasted. Would it have been better? Could he have made better decisions when it comes to the economy? Maybe a jobs bill right off the top. Maybe making the middle class tax cuts permanent. Do something that he could boast about right now instead of trying to defend his record.
Well, he could boast all he wants, but he will be defending his record in any case. An incumbent is always on the defensive, always under attack by the challenger. Because I can do things better, this has not been good enough. We still have high unemployment in this country. We've got a long way to go before we dig out from under this mess. Could he have done other things differently? Yeah, I'm sure he could have. But I think that the fact of the matter is that he made a choice. Look, if he had just cut taxes, slashed taxes, that would have been the quickest way to get money flowing into the economy. The choice he made is we're going to do these big infrastructure projects and make that a long-term investment in the infrastructure of the country, as well as putting people to work. It's not as fast as cutting taxes. That was his calculation. But you'll come out of it with a lot of roads rebuilt. And what the economists now need to do, and this is going to happen over time, is ROI, return on investment. And those are some of the studies that we're starting to see take place. And in some cases, he will be criticized because there will have been wasted dollars. In other cases, they will have done major projects that will pay back for years to come. Anybody who travels to Washington and flies into Dulles Airport now and comes into the city will see a metro system, a rail system that's being connected out to the airport. Dollar for dollar, bad investment. Over the next 50 years, great investment. It's a time frame.
So scale of 1 to 10?
Scale of 1 to 10 on jobs, I'll give him an 8.
All right.
And probably that may be generous, and I'd be attacked in the streets if I went out and said that, because there are a lot of people who aren't working or who are working for less who said this is not an 8. But I've heard the stories from the inside. I believe that we were about to see the global economy seize up, and emergency measures with very little time had to be taken, and he did.
Frank Sesno, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give you a 10 as a guest. Thanks so much for coming in. Really
Thank you
appreciate
very
it. I
much.
hope you come back again.